I even speak with a little bit more verbose. So I come from Scotland. I don't know if you know Scotland well. I come from a city called the Granite City. And I want to introduce that just a little bit quickly to give you an understanding of a background of me. So this city is built predominantly from one material, from granite. And it's one of only 4 cities in Europe that can make that claim. And this one material, I think it really has had a powerful effect on me as an architect growing up in this environment. Another interesting aspect of that is granite is such a hard material. It lasts, it outlives all kinds of other material. So to be a contemporary architect in this city is something quite difficult because the old buildings have weathered to a state in which they appear new in comparison to modern buildings that have not aged so well. So the first contact I really had with China in terms of a relationship of building was the problem of granite. So in the modern period, granite became too expensive to continue to quarry. So on the left, this is Rubislaw Quarry. It was the second largest man-made hole in Europe. And this is where the material, the 6 million tons of granite came to build the city. So what was really interesting to me was there was regulation within the city that buildings had to be built from granite. And at the same time, the granite would come from China. That the granite was cheaper to quarry in China and then travel halfway around the world to continue to build this city. And this was, to me, philosophically very difficult. This was not a local material if it was not sourced locally, certainly was not sustainable. But in another way, in a aesthetic or visual way, it was granite. And so a lot of my early practice was dealing with this problem. How could we make either buildings in granite, which I think we could not sustainably, or how could we make an alternative to that? So the quarry actually became disused. It filled up with water, and this was an interesting transformation in itself. So the photographs in the middle, they show the city 150 years ago, 200 years ago. It's almost the same. So to make contemporary architecture in this environment required a very high degree of design quality. So this is my own work. I just show very, very quickly. But this was me making a glass building in the Granite City. This was me making a zinc building, although I also used some waste granite from the quarrying process in the wall. And this is a brick building, but also I'm studying granite. I'm thinking about granite as I make this brick building. So what I'm trying to show you is a sort of contextual approach, which is not within the local material, not a continuation of the local material. And this is a wood building, building from paneled systems and wood cladding, building behind the granite. So these were all different ways to build buildings with a oneness, a one material approach, a total material. And so something that I now relate to as a topic is the idea of beyond concrete. And if I show you this statistic, I think you know what I mean. This is a phenomenally interesting statistic, I think. China poured more concrete in 2 years than America did in 100 years in its modern period. And maybe this is difficult to appreciate if you have not been to China, but to live and work here, you really see this. This is a place of concrete. And something very interesting to me, these are all my photographs from recently, from the past 3 weeks. I often see wood that is made from concrete. So in the top row of photographs, these are supports to trees, to wood trees, made from concrete trees, made from concrete casts or forms that are imitating tree. And some of these also are steel. One of them or two of them are steel, kind of infrastructure, Wi-Fi masts, this kind of thing. So I call this something like artificial nature. It's very interesting to me because if I compare to Scotland, where I was before, it was very important to be truthful when dealing with material, which of course it was not when we started to build with Chinese granite. But For a support to be made for a tree, there would be a distinction between what is nature, what is a support for the tree. And there's something much more entangled, much more enmeshed that I see philosophically, but also materially in China. And then on the lower level of these images is wood, a wood that is really wood, but it used in all kinds of ways that are ornamental. And particularly on the left side, this was super interesting to me. We made a visit to a factory recently, and they're a factory that's like a farm, growing Chinese medicine and herbs from the trunks of the tree. So the point is, wood is special in China, is a beyond concrete material, but it continues to be made also from concrete. And going beyond concrete and going beyond wood, I think also waste. Waste is really the material of the future. And this statistic I showed you about pouring concrete, there is so much of this kind of building. So on the left side, I found this so interesting. A tree has grown through the concrete building, and this is to be demolished soon, but to me was really something beautiful. And then the other two pictures is a site we're working with just now with students. This is an old seaweed factory, but both are typical. So in Scotland, whilst we had very different questions of preservation and conservation, I think that the question with working with what is there in terms of China is so much to do with this age of concrete industrial infrastructure that is often vacant and empty and disused. And so it's a kind of waste that we can work with. So I now talk quickly about Wenzhou Kane Design Lab, or we call it WKDL. So the nexus, the connection of, let's say, orientations or activities can be summarized as teaching, design, research, building. So our work is so often attempting to integrate these four. So for each project, we try that we are always doing all of these for each project. And this is difficult, difficult but very meaningful. So I talk about that a little bit more. Maybe I don't have time to go into this in depth, but maybe I can summarize a little bit. So the problem of two cultures, the problem of divisions in science, the possibilities of third cultures, of third spaces, third cultures. I would say design research is naturally a third culture. And I think Sino-Foreign is also a kind of third culture, which we work a lot with here at WKU. Architects working not formulaic, not methodically, but in a way against method. The design process can be said to be this, approaching through the discipline, what the discipline means for research, what it's capable of. With Michael Graves, I think we can learn a lot about multidisciplinary working, which we also do at WKDL. A kind of relational turning. I think sustainability can be characterized as a relational problem. And then maybe the need within an academic life for some degree of method. So for being non-methodical, but also for being rigorous in terms of other ways, in terms of disseminating and in terms of approaching. So I try to explain what that means a little bit more, but also, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there are differences between the system of research in China and the systems maybe we know in the West. So in particular, there's terminology, horizontal research, vertical research. And this may divide, I think you use in America the term outreach or community, and maybe in the UK we maybe are emphasizing that more as service. But let's say the difference between, is the project you're doing adding knowledge to the academy, serving the academy, or is it attempting to improve something in the culture or the society? Sometimes we can distinguish this something like science, art, maybe theory, practice also, but maybe most usefully understood as, are we trying to find truth? Are we contributing to original knowledge? Or are we trying to apply? And I think in so many ways, architecture suits horizontal research. So in the Chinese understanding, these are considered equally research, but with very different dimensions and orientations. And so this is a way to diagram who we are, WKDL, but within this framework of horizontal research. So of course we are in the East, but we are also communicating with you in the West. I come from this background, someone who designs buildings and who teaches design, probably like many of you, from the place of knowing how to design, knowing how to build buildings, and publishing design within that media. And then also I've moved into research, teaching from a place of a niche but particular specific knowledge within an area, and publishing scientifically within that. And then, of course, we are working as WKDL really in both realms. And so we expand within building design through design competition, where we can explore ideas in theoretical ways, exhibition design, where we're working within the medium of architecture and design, design build, which can be its own pedagogy, its own teaching. We've also been exploring how buildings can be research, particularly developing a method of research exhibition where we're collecting the data from the exhibition, and exhibition as dissemination as well as building as dissemination. Maybe I even go as far as to say building is the ultimate dissemination for architecture. So all of this maybe is our culture that orbits around WKDL. So multiple ways in which we can advance or approach or work, and all of that is a stimulating culture. But I think we also have something else, which is special and quite unique to the WKU project, which is a kind of, I use the term now, transculture rather than cross-culture. Cross-culture being comparison of two different cultures. I think it's very much more something that has been born, something that is neither one or the other fully. So I'll talk a little bit more about what that means later, but if I just try to be quick, we have four research areas. So the first is design research and third space. And probably there could be another lecture all about this, but in China there is the Design Institute, and in particular there's the academic-based Design Institute. So this is a Soviet model of the combination of practice, teaching, and research. So something in the Western system in which we have to try to unite is actually quite natural to the Chinese system. And I think it's also, in an interesting way, very similar to the Beaux Arts studio environment, where there would be practice, teaching, and to some degree also research occurring within the same space, within the same environment. So I characterize these as third spaces, but also not in a new way, in a way it always was. Sino-foreign as a transcultural ground. So everything we do in a way is grounded in this constant discussion of culture, our different backgrounds, and this is happening, I think, unavoidably and in quite powerful and impactful ways. Energy open relational design. Because we're short on time, maybe these images can help to explain what I'm meaning. The solar panels are organized such that the shadow they cast is beneficial to the cow. The cow can be shaded by the solar panel. So this is an example of a relationship. And I think in so many ways, architects are capable of this kind of coordination. And this picture also where the man is cooling himself down by sleeping, by being in contact with the stone. I see this most of the year just by looking out the window. And research exhibition, which is the method we've been developing, whereby exhibition itself is replacing questionnaire as a method of research. So if I put all of this together, our first area that we say is interesting for us is the third space between design research and between the China, America, the Sino-foreign, the East-West, this space. So this is like a territory for us. And then number two, Sino-foreign is transcultural ground. We're doing work in the East. We're writing about it in the West. We're receiving the curriculum from you guys. We're having this kind of dialogue through the lecture today. Maybe you have some questions. Maybe we collaborate on things. So all of this is a bridge afforded by the university structure. And then, oh, sorry. Energy open relational design. So all of our projects, which are design build, are to be energy open. that this is what we're striving for. So there's an experiment with what we're building, and research exhibition, meaning the method we've been developing. So we work not just as me. We have research assistants within the lab. There's currently 3 of those who are graduates. They're Chinese. They come from different backgrounds, some from our own program, and they work within the lab. So a lot of the time when I'm teaching, they're running projects, they're driving projects forward. We have the WKDL internship program. This has 11 students. They're drawn from across the design disciplines in our school. So people like you guys who are getting some initial experience working on the project. So there's still teaching occurring there, but it's in a different type of environment and pedagogy through working. Horizontal collaboration agreements is the way that we create partnerships. So I brought in the horizontal working before. So essentially we have, I suppose we could relate it something like a contract, but really it's much more a kind of partnership contract. Our lab is adjacent to the master's program, so we're not fully integrated, but we're sharing briefs, we're sharing topics. We have a review later this week, and the students of the lab will also go along with the students of the master's program for the review. And then once a year, we plan to run this design build workshop, which I talk about a little bit later. So now I show you 6 projects to give you an idea of all of this work. So first one is called Offline Park. This was a competition in Mannheim in Germany. So on the right is an image of Schrebergarten, which you may be familiar with, I'm not sure. But during 18th and 19th century mass urbanization, the growth of cities, there was a lack of green space. And so Dr. Schrebergarten was an educator who was identifying this as a problem, particularly for families and for young children. So he's saying there's not enough green space in the city. And so he pioneered this idea of something like a garden, really like a grid of garden space that could be rented by families so that they could spend time in nature, in the outside. So it was an antidote to a problem of density and urbanization. So the competition is to create a park of the future. And so working within the spirit of the park as an antidote to a social problem, we identified smartphone use, or we might even say smartphone addiction. If we were to look at a kind of problem of young people today, it probably is not a problem of accessing green space, but it may be something related to a kind of mental calmness, an ability to be in nature, in a park, in a way that's not distracted. So the competition is an energy competition. So that part of the idea led us into making a space in which you could not access data. But really it's an energy competition. It's an energy technology competition. So the Faraday cage on the right-hand side is a kind of mesh which is preventing the electromagnetic signal to get through. So it's a place in which you could not use your phone. And there's a history in this city of making grid shell dome. And also we were interested in living structure, in growing vines and making architecture from this. So the mesh we developed is using a type of solar cell. It's only 1 millimeter in diameter. So this instead of a solar panel is able to draw energy from all different directions, but it can make a very fine, very transparent mesh. So this was our design, a Faraday cage that was also a way to collect solar energy, that was also a way to prevent people from accessing data. And this is also a root ball which we use to make the living structure. So in the park to which our project is an extension, there is this Art Nouveau lamps and lighting system for the park, and then also this making of plants into something more ornamental. So on the right-hand side is our project, which the park has an expo, a landscape expo, to which there's a lot of garden waste, soil and vegetation. So we collect that up in the root ball, and this becomes the planting of willow in an Art Nouveau inspired living structure. So all of this is really an energy system. If you remember the image of the cows shaded by the solar panels, it's really a way to do two things at once, which is to collect the energy of the sun and at the same time make a type of park space that is otherwise unavailable, a space in which people are, in a sense, freed to be in direct connection with nature because it's not possible to be distracted by the phone, this kind of thing. But we also found that butterflies are dying in large numbers in Germany because of the 4G and the 5G signal. So to be underneath this, within this Faraday cage, is also a place where the butterfly population can be strengthened. So this is what we tried to show with the animation here, is that part of the growth of the forest is also the changing of the space through lifting up the mesh. So there's a history on the site, a kind of palimpsest layering history where it was a field and then it was army barracks and something else and something else. So the ground is always being turned over and built upon. So our mesh is working with the existing foundations and trying not to build, trying to reveal and use the load-bearing capacities that are within this history of construction. So it was an experimental project. We won an international prize for this. It was exhibited in Germany. For us, the competition was really a way to explore how there could be energy infrastructure that was also some kind of art, some kind of aesthetic that we were interested in, but then also was space, how the park could be space. So this was the first project, offline park. And second one, Travelers Amid Streams and Mountains. So this is the campus gate of our university here at Wenzhou. So these are paintings. It's not the same artist, but it's the same, let's say, painting. So what I'm meaning by this is within Chinese landscape painting, there is a kind of a continual re-examination or revisiting of a composition. And Xuanshui painting, the mountain water painting, it's not really about depicting a particular place. It's a kind of meditation upon harmony. So these paintings, they represent integration, complexity, and harmony. They're striving for a balance between man and nature, between mountain, water, sky. So for us, this is Chinese tradition, but is also harmony, is also a composition of difference in a harmonic balance. And so there are a lot of rules to a painting like this, which we studied, we learned about. And so for the gate, we were interested in geometry and composition and formal relationships. And another formal relationship, we could say, this is a Mercator map of the world, but we're finding a line. We're finding a line between WKU and Kane. And this line is in a way an abstraction. It's of course not the globe, it's folded out. It's an abstract line, it's a mental line. So for us, there's a difference then between the Chinese context and let's say the intellectual contribution of Kane, providing the curriculum. And so with the gate, we're trying to really make sense of this complex hybrid project that is WKU. So we're using a system of geometry from the East and a system of geometry from the West, and then we're combining them. So maybe because of time, I can't explain in so much detail, but the elements of a gate are quite utilitarian. You know, we need bollards, we need fence, we need a guard building, we need lighting. So we tried, could these elements be, in a sense, nature, an artificial nature? And could they be composed in a way that was informed by the study of the Chinese painting, but also informed by this line that we take as a kind of high art concept from the Western abstraction. So in the end, it looks, I suppose you could say, it looks natural. But really, we're trying, when we make a fence, we're making bamboo. When we make lights, we're making rocks. These are a type of solar recycled glass, and so becomes a light in evening time. And we use a lot of reflection. So the campus is already quite advanced. We're trying in a way not to necessarily add a new architecture, but add an architecture that tries to integrate and make sense of what's around it, and in particular reflect what's around it. So the guard building is made of recycled glass bricks. The fence is bamboo, but the fence is also water, a kind of nature's fence. The bollards are made from the glass mountains. So all of this is a kind of transmutation of kind of utility into nature, but it's also an organization which is informed in lots of ways by two very different geometric systems. So these are the models, which was at a recent exhibition. Maybe gives you some feel for the project. So next I show you Future Lab, which was a series of exhibitions in Shanghai, where we were exhibiting alongside other leading schools over here, schools of art and design. So we were exhibiting around a topic of student and faculty working together, which I think is something quite interesting and relatively unique. I don't know how unique it is to America, but in China here, I think to work in this way is very valuable, but it's also quite unique. So we show this in the context of what other schools are doing, that our faculty and students, they collaborate on projects and work together, they co-create, and this kind of fusion is where a lot of the teaching is happening. So the campus gate I just introduced is the model in the center, and you can see the paintings hanging like a scroll. This is making a kind of canopy where we're almost like simulating this feeling of being under the roof and looking through as a way to introduce people to the idea of the model. But we have also a bridge that is going to be built. This is designed by Linnea with some students. And also all kinds of other projects from across the design school. There's work of students here, as well as students and faculty. And some of this is industrial design, some of it is graphic design. But we were trying to show how things are also moving between the disciplines, trying not to categorize too much. So we have work from all sides of our school, but the way that it's presented is trying to really say one thing about the school, which is this student and faculty working together in a way that comes outside of the classroom, crosses the boundary into the realm of the horizontal research dynamic. So this was the opening of the exhibition. Of course, so interesting to get the feedback and exchange between the other schools. It was quite a large event. This was the second time we've done this, and I think it was really a great experience and did a lot for our school to show the work. But maybe this part is even more interesting. So that was the exhibition in Shanghai. And then recently we were asked to teach a class with children in a local school in Wenzhou. And they actually gave us a classroom because it's a newly built school, so they have some kind of empty spaces. So we were in a way accidentally came into this, and so we were thinking what to do. So actually we rejected the classroom, and they had a gallery space. They'd already asked us to put the Future Lab exhibition into the gallery space, but we decided we could teach through the exhibition. So this is pupils collecting waste material in the school campus. And you can see in the background our waste material model. I'll talk about this project a little bit more. So essentially, we were teaching through the making and installation of our previous Future Lab exhibition. So students were being introduced to all kinds of creative practices and techniques of making, but really it was much more conceptual than that. They were being asked to make a kind of, or to relate to the original exhibition as a model. So to make a new iteration of a previous model. So this was a way that they would study and try to understand the previous work, and then that they would make their own work. And this kind of transformation of ideas, I think was quite interesting to them actually. Well, they were super interested to do the work, but what I mean is there can be a kind of copying within the education system. And I think this was trying to introduce how you can work with references in a way that's involving creative transformation rather than mimicry. So on the left is the MGC sign that we made in Shanghai, and on the right is made by the children. It's their own acronym of their school. Um, on the left is the poison mushrooms of China, made by our students of graphic design through 3D printing. And on the right-hand side is the healthy fruit of China, made by the pupils through hand clay modeling. On the left is the infographic lighting sign, So Dope. It's like a positive message made by our students. And then Think Creatively is made by their students. You get the idea that each new iteration is in some way a transformation of the ideas of the previous work. And then we show these together in a room where we make a new floor that creates a line down a diagonal across the room, and it's like a mirror. So on one side is our exhibition from Shanghai, and on the other side is what the pupils make as a direct response to that. And so then they're placed in dialogue. And so really the main sort of culmination of all of this teaching, it was the exhibition opening, which was a big event. We did a conference, and we brought people from our school to come to meet the pupils from their school. So this was an exchange, and they can speak English actually quite well, because originally I thought maybe they could not, and we would use the models as a means of communication. So really this was a story of two exhibitions, and the restaging of the Shanghai exhibition became a teaching tool and a pedagogy for the second exhibition, and this is now open until November. So I think, Craig, you're coming over to visit, so maybe you will visit the school and see the exhibition. And Stephanie also, I roped in to come one day, and she helped the students were making some boxes. So it was quite fun to do. So now a change of tone. This project is called Zero Burial. So I would like to talk about this longer, but I realize I will run over time. So this was actually a very early experience when I came to China. And people say, these are my photographs, and people say to me they don't look real. They look like they come from a computer game world or something. But this is a real place. So on the left is a village I went to, and this is ancestral worship. There's a crescent moon pond, and there is the elders of the village are commemorated through these totems. And then on the right-hand side is a very typical, all around our campus, you will find these tomb constructions, which are not ancient, are relatively recent. But there is a policy change in China. I was amazed, in a sense, quite moved to see these structures. But actually they're no longer legal. There is a policy change whereby burying is no longer permitted. So the whole nation is moving to cremation, or has moved to cremation. This is a very large shift in death culture, and I think is an architectural question also. But for sure, it's a sustainability question. That's the way I approach it, which is that if we cremate bodies, there is carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. It's very bad for the environment. But there is also some good sustainability grounds for the change in policy. The use of land of the tombs was problematic for a country that needs land to be productive. So this really, I think, is sort of the wrong solution for the right reasons. So what we have been trying to do is study this change and try to propose alternatives. Could there be a sustainable funeral? And for us, this has been particularly resumation, a use of water. There's an elemental understanding in Chinese history, fire and water. And so moving from earth to fire is a very significant change of kind of relation to the idea of where the soul sits and where the soul moves. So maybe I don't have time to go into it in much more detail, but this is an ongoing topic. in which in all kinds of ways we've applied for a research grant. We were a finalist in a local research process in which we were then told it was illegal what we were trying to do. So we've been advised and supported to apply to the province level for this project. But really what we're talking about is, can we connect much more closely with the deep death traditions and rituals of China, but in a way which does not shift into cremation, but shifts into some new sustainable processing of the body, memorial activity, which is in a way given the art and theatre connection with the past through the architecture, through the way that we make a memorial space or a funeral building. So this is also a studio at the moment where we're looking at data. Of course, data has an energy cost, storing data has an energy cost. We're looking at DNA as a data storage technology. And could there be an idea of not necessarily keeping the body, keeping the memory of the person through data? Could data, and maybe that sounds crazy, but does actually happen already in Beijing, that there are, it's extremely expensive to get a funeral plot. Sometimes people are using tablets, a sort of iPad hanging on a tree as a kind of digital memory of someone. So this studio that we run just now is looking at this question. Could we imagine futures in which we commemorate and memorialize using data? So this is the site, which is an abandoned seaweed factory, and there's a beautiful sunset here. The land tapers towards the west where the sun is going down, and so although it's an abandoned site, many people come to watch the sun go down. So for me, it's quite spiritual, a beautiful place, but also is typical. I mean, it's untypical in its beauty, but it's typical as a waste, as a concrete structure that is abandoned. And so this is the challenge to the students. The adaptive reuse of this site, can it be a spiritual place? Can it be a funeral memorial structure and using data? So this is our review from last semester. This project's continuing, where we used, we got into a little bit of trouble to do this, but we found an abandoned part of Kane Hall, which is a new building on the campus. And so we're really talking about reusing waste space. And so we do the review in that kind of reuse of waste space as a way to kind of impact that lesson. And we will go, the space on the right, we will go there actually in tomorrow. Tomorrow we go there for the midterm review. So we're going to go to the site, and we have the critics coming to the site, and we're going to conduct the review there also as a way to kind of embed the lesson of the place. And this was a competition we did, which was imagining, actually it was our first use of AI in competition process. So we're imagining this future of ancestral worship through data, the reuse of towers and abandoned concrete structures as ancestral homes. So probably also, I don't have time to explain that, but to me, the ancestral home, it's not familiar. It's not something we have in Scotland, at least in the UK, but is separate to the question of processing the body, is another type of space. So with the abandoned buildings, there is the waste space, and there is the need for space for ancestral homes. So that's our project, Zero Burial. This one does not have a title. So this is not a mistake, these question marks. It's a very new project. We're currently working on it, so I show it without the title. So this is within Kane Hall, the WKU Museum, and through a kind of accident of circumstances, we came to suggest that there should be some art installation within this space. So this is the kind of introductory lobby before entering the WKU Museum, which will be built in the summertime. So we were really proposing, but then also was proposed back to us something that we may do. So this is art or sculpture, but we want to make it also something that connects to our research. So I was in Athens recently, and I came across this statue, which is Socrates and Confucius, a conversation. Now, it's not that they did not meet, but they overlapped. They were alive at the same time. And if we were to try to sort of pin Western and Eastern culture to figures, maybe it would be these two. And so what we're interested in is to represent something of this idea of trans culture, the idea of not a marriage but a baby, the idea that maybe it's too simple to think this is a partnership. These are two quite distinct in many ways intellectual cultures that we have in China and America, or West and Sinoese. And if we could represent those in terms of language, but also in terms of integration, and to consider script, and to consider a new type of script, which is maybe what we have with algorithms and digital fabrication and AI. So we're at the moment we're still working on the script. We're still designing this, but the Scholar's Rock is something very interesting to me, and of course to many people in China, as a thinking tool. So in the literati courtyards of Chinese gardens, you will find these stones, and these stones are chosen with certain rules of form, and the form is in a way is taking the mind away, taking the mind on a journey. So the scholar would stare at the stone as a way almost to be in a meditative state, such that they can have ideas, they can think, they can write poetry, they can be imaginative. So the idea that a stone, a form, could induce intellectual activity, this is something we want to work with. And then also can we make that literally from script, from language of the East and of the West? So we're still working on what is the right script to choose and the narrative and what we mean by that. But we've been going back to Greek and to Oracle bone script. So Greek moving into Roman and Latin and English. And this is what we've made. This is at the moment, this is draft. But the idea is a scholar's rock, but one that represents integration of these two intellectual traditions. And with the third type of scripting being the actual process that makes and manufactures the form. So this is a kind of introduction to the museum. The museum that's been designed, to me, is very literal. You go into the museum, it has all the dates, this happened, this happened, this happened. It's very literal in its communication style. And so the idea of this is there's a conceptual piece which introduces us to the meaning of this integration. And it also has within it messages and use of mirrors. There are two mirrors. One is embedded, it's part of the structure within the sculpture, and it's part of what allows it to hang, but also it creates a very interesting complexity with the other mirror, where you can read through a reflection some of the kind of mottos, the lines of inspiration that the school has and wishes to impart. So there's something like a new perspective by looking reflectively, but also by looking from a new point of view. You can read, you can get clarity. So we try to embed these ideas, but this is very new. We're still working on the script just now. We try to involve AI as part of an input to the script, and we haven't solved that fully yet, but it would be 3D printed. So this is the digital fabrication process to make it. So next project, waste material. So I just very quickly talk about some sustainability lessons. So on the left is China's most sustainable building, or at least it was up until recently. On the right, a building with trees on the roof. And I notice students, they often confuse the idea of how a building works and how it looks. The idea that if a building has trees, this would be a sustainable building. And I think this is also partly to do with how we relate visually to physicality, particularly boundaries. We perceive boundaries and space visually, but of course environmentally is often working in an open systems, open boundary sense. In Scotland, I think we were in a way quite focused on the right building, but often in the wrong place. So we would make very good energy objects, but of course their kind of infrastructure energy costs um, are problematic. You know, driving the car to the remote location, and so the wrong building in the right place is a legitimate direction. So as we make low energy buildings, the embodied impact that becomes much more significant. So meaning it matters more and more and more what you build the building from, to go back to material and granite beyond concrete, and material library. So we could say future practice should care much more what material do you make the building from, and a material practice, I think for students, you guys need to know materials. And I think the most useful library, or one, well, you could argue this, but one of the most useful libraries to have access to as a student of architecture is a material library where you can understand materials. In Wenzhou, it's possible to work outside for a lot of the year, but actually the kind of move towards comfort, to providing air-conditioned buildings, I think it's leading students to not really understand what's taking place in terms of temperature and environment. So actually, we could use outdoor space more in our campus, essentially. Entropy, the idea that buildings need constant work, constant maintenance, that there's all kinds of incidental gains. So we talk about buildings as sources of waste. And this is our wonderful new architecture and design building on the left-hand side. And it creates, I don't mean this as a criticism, but there are space that could be activated more. Maybe a kind of, all buildings have this, waste space. A space that requires some idea to be inserted or added. But also in particular, in this climate in Wenzhou, shadow space. So you can see on the right-hand side, this is very typical. The building creates shadow, and there's a man just lying down, putting his body in contact with the stone in order to cool down, in order to be in the shadow. And our campus is also under construction. There's so much waste generated every day on the campus, in the campus. So waste material, waste space, waste energy. So we diagrammed the campus as a system. What was happening in terms of waste, where was it going, before we could then intervene within this. Maybe I'll explain why we do that later. But this idea, just to go back to this idea of comfort, can be achieved not by conditioning the air, but by the contact or the touch between the body and the surface. So on the left is actually Xi Jinping's home. He lived in this kind of earthen building at some point in his life. Shanghai there, the building of the new glass towers, so much destruction is happening in order to create the new urban centers. The kind of problem of, I think, not seeing surface opportunistically enough in terms of energy potentials. And processes. I really like this example on the left where the formwork that is used for the concrete is struck and then made into shutters for the building. So the wood imparts something to the concrete imparts something to the wood, and together the process is complete through the reuse of the construction process material within the final building, and a kind of entanglement of nature. The ability to be inside, semi-outside, also fully outside, to be in nature. So the point is, all of these are sustainability lessons that are quite difficult to grasp, I think, for students. And in a way, maybe we can't blame them, because they occupy worlds that don't impart this knowledge. So what we would like to do, partly for another reason, our workshop ideally could extend so students can build outside. So we're making a canopy and a bench, but we're also making a materials library and a kind of reuse center, recycling center, where material that is wasted on the campus can be stored and then can be reused by students within their creative practice, which of course can inform and change that practice because of the material. So we categorize this, wood, metal, ceramics, plastics, different containers. And this is the workshop where we plan to use the spaces, the voids made with the windows, and some of these are roller shutter doors, we add in these containers that are storing the material. And we're going to build this through a design build workshop. So the workshop will be students and faculty and local masters working together to, in an intense way, to create almost like a material essay, each container. And the container will then store the material, but will also act as a kind of material library, showing in real time the waste that is being generated on the campus and then is reused. So there's also a use of waste soil in making the rammed earth bench, which will be a natural cooling. It will have water run through it as a way to cool it down, to mediate the climate. So it's possible to be outside at times when it otherwise would not. And also the waste of the coffee grinds and the soil is also kept in another part of the project. So this maybe helps you to see how all of that comes together. And that's then us close to the end. This was the process of making this model. So the model that we put in the exhibition in Shanghai was made through construction waste itself. So this was one of our experiments to make this project. So the idea is in future students could not always be buying new material, but interfacing with waste material. But this is their own sort of exploration of what's possible with the reuse of such material. So in a way, we went through that experiment ourselves to make this model. So we hope to build this project some point later in the year. The first stage will happen in the summertime, which is the design build workshop of the boxes. And something interesting that happened, just to end the lecture, we were invited to another project recently, and it was a beautiful waterfall. They wanted us to make a coffee shop near the waterfall. But anyway, we noticed this, which was like an old children's play area made of shipping containers. This is a waste. And we said we prefer to work with this. So they were really inspired by that idea. And it looks now that this will be one of our projects. So we're going to take this waste and find a way to rebuild with this. So you can see like the continuation of this idea of making with waste material. So maybe this is a small but meaningful contribution this project can have, which is for you students to be introduced to all kinds of energy systems, sustainability lessons, material library of waste in a microcosm. And so you go out into the world with this as a kind of familiar practice. So I end the lecture now, but final slide, I just was aware that maybe students, you don't know Chinese architects very much. I don't know. There is some amazing contemporary architecture in China, not really to be found in the cities, actually to be found at the small scale and in rural areas. And I chose 10 architects who I would encourage you to look up. So these are, I don't know, I might say the top 10 in my view, but not exactly. More that each of these offers, I think, really amazing, really serious contemporary architecture that's happening in China. Not necessarily people who are always Chinese, but a kind of regional practice of contemporary architecture that's happening in this part of the world. So maybe these are people, if you don't know them, you would be interested to look up. So that's the end. Thank you very much. Very happy to discuss anything further or take any questions. I hope I didn't go too quick. I just tried to race through to show you all these projects. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's speaking, by the way. I don't hear. I don't know if someone's speaking just now. Maybe it's on mute.
I have a question.
Hello.
Hello, my name is Katarina. I'm a Canadian at Union student, and I'm very happy that I was able to join this lecture. And thank you for sharing your true story and your origin place, Scotland, with the granite. And I'm sorry if I missed that part that you did mention, but what about now? Is granite is still something that is being used in buildings that are arise now in the town, or is that already a part of history? Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's still current. I've not built something in that part of the world recently, but when I was there a few years ago, there was a policy. Any building should have 20% granite used in its front facade. So, so it's possible to not do that, but to not do that, you make an argument, make an architectural argument to not do that. So in some ways, it is possible to build without granite, either in an area that would be regarded as low value by the planning authority, or with an architectural argument, which is the kind of work that I did. I would argue against granite because it was not a local material, it was coming from China. Some developers would agree to quarry. It is still possible to quarry granite, not from within the city, but from nearby. It's still possible to get granite in Scotland, but it comes at this additional cost. But there was all kinds of other problems to do with labor, to do with the mass of the blocks, to do with load-bearing structures. But stone is a natural material, and stone is a sustainable material in a lot of ways of thinking. There's been a movement actually in UK, particularly in London, to make buildings from load-bearing stone again. It's quite interesting actually. I was looking at that recently. Really, for me, it was like a first contact with China. It was a reason that I started to know something about the building culture of China, and was also not only granite. It was also to do with handrails. This is another story, but we also have the oil industry in that city, and the oil industry is very rich and needs a lot of steel. So it was extremely expensive to do anything in metal in that city because anyone who could fabricate in metal could sell what they make to the oil industry. So actually, there was two materials that were difficult, metal and granite, and for those reasons, wood. This part of northeast Scotland became a world leader in modern wood technology, really from an economic point of view. So what was very frustrating to me, that technology was super advanced, but it was hidden. So people wanted to own a stone building. And so what would happen is there would be granite from China covering up a really amazing wood structure. So all of that, I think, was a mess philosophically, that I disagreed with. But I suppose maybe what it's getting to is it's an international picture. You know, even if we separate aesthetics or something like that, regional kind of practice, in a way, it's unavoidably international when it comes to the question of material.
Yes.
Thank you for the question.
David, can you hear me?
Hello, yes, I can hear you now.
All right. What's wonderful for me about your lecture is how engaged you are with the communities around you. And it seems to me that there's real curiosity on the part of those communities in what you're doing through the Wenzhou Kane Design Lab. and that has great benefit from the students. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, for sure, for sure. Yes, what I find here is there's very positive kind of opportunities happen all the time. I think people here are fascinated by, let's say, people from outside, foreigners, Westerners, whatever. So there's a kind of natural interest, which I really like. Children, for like you've probably had this experience, David. Like I took a flight the other day, and these children were just looking at me through the whole flight, and then asking me if I was a girl. I think because I had long hair, and this kind of thing is quite fun to me. Like, so I suppose I'm interested in this place that I'm in, and this place is interested in me and us here. So there's that. But I think beyond all that is there's so much development. There's so many kind of questions which are related to urbanism and development of buildings and style and culture, because it's a place in which this is all happening. So for me, moving from Scotland, where there would be such craft and um, interest in extremely small things that would be so difficult to do. You could work for years just to get one project to have permission. Then come to a place in which things really happen. Um, Getting projects off the ground is, I mean, it's also difficult, but really possible in China in a way that's very different to the West, I think.
Great. Well, we're really lucky to have you there. I think you've done so much in such a short time, and it's such a foundation for us to build on going forward. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. And I hope, I don't know how many students are there, but what I was trying to do with the lecture a little bit was try to interest you in coming over. I think our universities will profit from the movement of students in both directions culturally. And I don't know what motivates you or doesn't motivate you, let's say, at a kind of broad level about travel. But what I tried to show is architecturally, it's really interesting what goes on over here. So I think maybe that becomes a motivation for you. I don't know how aware you are, but there is seriously good contemporary architecture happening in China. And I think if you come here, it's only partly to visit the campus and all of that. I think it's also a base from which to explore this contemporary scene and these issues in communities that are around here.
We let him get his morning coffee.
Let him. Okay. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.